Hi, everybody. It's Tuesday morning. So hard to remember what day of the week it is, especially COVID. Okay, so I am here today with Dr. Allyson Holmes-Knight, who is the clinical director at Daybreak Health. And I'm thrilled to be here with you. And thank you for getting up on Pacific time, which is now 7:30 in the morning. So thanks for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
When you and I were talking last night about what should we talk about, you mentioned that our kids are experiencing so much grief right now. And that really struck me as a conversation that we haven't been having a lot. We've been talking about depression and anxiety and all of the things that we're seeing. You can see that and you can feel that. But the idea of packaging that as grief is something we haven't really talked about. So I'd love to hear about what that means for you.
Absolutely. Generally when we think about grief, we think about the loss of a loved one. In this case, when we're thinking about grief, what we're actually talking about is the loss of an entire experience for our teens. So they are experiencing high school in a way that generally high school is not set up to be experienced. And so they're grieving the loss of being with their friends and being able to experience new things, being able to really develop kind of their own sense of identity through being able to be around their peers and through being able to kind of explore different avenues of activities and sports and all of the other things that high school actually has to offer.
Do they know they're experiencing grief?
Most of the time, that's not necessarily the word that they would use for it. I think you're right when we say we're talking a lot about depression and anxiety, but it actually is grief. I just don't know that we've actually labeled it that.
Yeah, and how important, how helpful is it to label it that?
I think it's really important. One, just because it's important for all of us to be able to actually name our experiences and our feelings as they're happening for us, but also because I want to be able to normalize this idea that their loss of experience, their loss of exploration, and their loss of the kind of this sense of autonomy that happens in high school is actually a shared experience of grief, and that they're not actually having this experience kind of in a silo, although it may feel that way a lot of the time.
That's so interesting because I think that's so comforting for everybody to know that you're not, that's one of the things about COVID. None of us are doing any of this in isolation. We're all experiencing it.
Right.
So help us as parents.
Mm-hmm.
What can we say? Can we bring that up to our kids? Is it kind of like, hey, I just want to tell you I learned this thing today? How do we have that conversation?
I think it's a really good way for parents to start this conversation is to actually name it for what it is. And we can say as parents, we recognize that your high school years or your high school experience is not what you had in mind. It's not what any of us had planned. And we just want to kind of have a conversation with you about what this experience has been like for you and talk about some of the things that you may be missing. And as parents, we can say, we are also grieving, not just the experience of our teens in high school, but we are experiencing the own grief in our own lives, right? So as parents, we don't get to participate in the same things or see our friends or go to work in the same way that we would. And so just to normalize that this is something that's happening for everybody is a really good way to open up a conversation about it.
So that distinction is so interesting to me because what we hear about more is the grief that parents are feeling about their kids feeling grief. Mm-hmm. And not even just that, but like that we're missing out as parents on some of those milestones that were so important to us too. Absolutely. Is that burdensome for kids to hear that you're feeling sad about their life as opposed to your life?
That's an interesting question. I think it really depends on how you phrase it. And you can say to your kids, like, I'm sad that I don't get to watch or experience your joy in this. And it doesn't then put the onus on the teen, but instead what it does is it helps validate that the parents are aware that the teen is actually having these experiences, right? A lot of times when you're working with teens, one of the first things you hear them say is, my parents just don't understand. My parents don't get it. As if like we were never teens before. Somehow that gets lost in translation. But for them to say, I do understand that your high school experience is not what you had planned. And that makes me sad for you. It makes me sad as your parent to see that you don't get to go to school and you don't get to participate in sports or clubs or theater. I think it will help teens understand or recognize that their parents do see that what they are actually trying to manage and deal with is completely unprecedented.
So I feel like in my family, there must be a line, because like if I care too much about their emotions, it really annoys them.
Sure.
And it's even more than annoying. It's like, it's the get a life kind of reaction, right? So there is something about kind of separating your life from theirs. Is there like an ideal way to articulate that to your kids?
When you're talking to your teens, you do want them to know that this is the time in which they are becoming their own person, that they are figuring out what they like and what they don't like, what works for them, what doesn't work for them. But as a parent, you can still say, I'm still here for you, that door is always open, and that, none of us know necessarily the right way to navigate a world pandemic because we've never been here before. And it's okay to ask for help, especially in situations like this. And that as your parent, I'm going to be here with that door open for you with no judgment, but just a way to be able to support you and help you and listen. And, just opening that door and allowing your teen to have that in their back pocket is just a really important step in opening the lines of communication.
I'm going to bring up Stephanie's question, which is her son is saying he doesn't miss being in school, that it's boring, and he doesn't want to play his trumpet. And I tried to explain, you're not experiencing the real high school band on Zoom, and your school right now is not the same, especially not being in class with your friends. She's trying to always validate his feelings. Mm-hmm. So
absolutely. And it's very interesting, as you think about it, because kids or even adults, we don't really know what we don't know. And so if we're not actually getting that in life, or that live experience of what maybe high school band would be like when you're with other students in a room, you don't know that you're really missing it. And so, we can also continue just to name that distance learning is hard, that getting that connection, isn't there the same way. And that hopefully when we are able to return to school, that we'll see what we were actually missing, that we'll appreciate it in a different light.
It's interesting because I think her son is probably a freshman. He's turning 15 soon. Mm-hmm. So they never got to experience high school.
Right.
So, it might have some scary components to it also. Like, this is so safe.
Absolutely. I think that those who are transitioning, especially from something like 8th grade to 9th grade, where they're going into high school, they're struggling in a very unique way because they don't know what the experience of high school looks like. They don't know what it's like to be able to walk through the halls and meet new people, or to be able to joke and laugh, or to hang out with kids at lunch in that type of high school setting, which brings a very different feel than middle school. And so, it's not surprising, especially for 9th graders, that they're not necessarily recognizing what they're missing.
Yeah. Okay. So you talk a lot about exploration as being one of the ways that kids, I guess, individuate, like they have to figure out who they want to be. And now you're not getting that opportunity, but there are things we can do. You have ideas for us.
There are things that we can do. If you notice that your teen is interested in something, encourage them to continue to explore that. Be curious about that as their parent. Have them share with you kind of what their passions are. There are, as much as we hate screen time and as much as we talk about it, there are other groups and there are online avenues for them to learn more about what they're curious about. And if that doesn't work, is there something that you can do socially distanced and safe outside? Can you have them maybe start exercising if they're into sports, or doing their own individual workout to prepare them for next season? Can you as the parent get active with them if they're into art? Even if you're not good at it, just being able to have that experience and that exposure. Let them show you their art. Encourage them. Buy them the art supplies if that's something that's available to you. Have them maybe watch YouTube videos on how to sculpt or how to paint or whatever it is that's interesting to them. Try to get them exposed to it in any way that you actually can. Hook them up with other adults in your community that may be able to provide them some direction or answer some questions they may have about a particular topic.
All right. I want to like drill down on that a little bit, because I think that's a really significant part of what we're living through right now. We parent in isolation in ways that generations in the past didn't. And so there's a little bit of this sense of like we're supposed to be able to do it all. And when we are told to look elsewhere for help, it's because we weren't enough. So, tell us, how do we get over that?
Parenting is so hard. I just want to start by saying that parenting is incredibly difficult, even when you're not in a pandemic. And with parents working, maybe both parents are working full time, or you have a single parent that's working, trying to make ends meet, it just becomes stressful and overwhelming, and it's too much for one person. When we send our children to school, we are encouraging other adults to be an important part of their lives and teach them the things that we don't know. I can't teach my child calculus. It's just not what I'm going to do. And that's okay. If you aren't necessarily interested in the same things as your child, or you aren't necessarily a master of that particular topic, that's okay. It doesn't mean you're weak. What it means is that you recognize what you can give your child and what maybe someone else will be able to help you with. I would much rather a math teacher teach my child math than me, because I'm going to teach them the wrong way, or I'm not going to give them all of the information they need to be successful. It's the same thing with their extracurriculars and their sports. Reach out to coaches or other community leaders or other adults. Maybe some teachers are volunteering extra time to be able to spend with their students. Teachers are missing their students. And so there are a lot of teachers that I've found that are willing to spend a couple of extra minutes with a student just to talk about the things that they're really interested in. There are clubs out there that are still providing information and providing activities and resources for youth. So don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help. We can't do it alone.
Yeah, and I think we should start pivoting that you get an A+ for building your village instead of for doing it yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as teenagers, we do this struggle of really still needing our parents in some ways, and really wanting to individuate and really kind of wanting to find our own voice. And sometimes a great middle step for that is finding another trusted adult in the community that you can talk to, that you can ask questions to, that you can kind of do some of that exploration if maybe that relationship with parents isn't there yet.
Or just isn't, you can't be at all. You just can't be at all. Okay, so I just want to share Lori's ideas because they're excellent. My 16-year-old picked up guitar, knitting, photography. I let him order whatever he needs on Amazon to support these new hobbies. Lori, that's great. That's really excellent stuff. And for people who might not be able to just go on Amazon and order, at libraries, there's so many ways to get ideas.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And ways that parents can even get involved, as your teen or as your child is exploring kind of new activities, don't be afraid to try it with them, even if it's new to you.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's great. And it's such a bonding opportunity. And sometimes your kids will pick these things up quicker. And so they get to be the expert, right?
They get to teach you along the way.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So this time is so unusual. We all know that. It's a time when our kids typically would be pushing away from us, and there's not that opportunity. So, how do we do this, not helicopter, which we're being criticized of doing, but also step in and help our kids find ways to explore? It's a funny charge, one that we almost can't figure out how to do.
Right. And sometimes by modeling the behaviors that we want to see from our kids and our teens is a really good way to go. As I believe her name is Lori was talking about, her son tried all of these new activities. And that's, also, like I said, an opportunity for parents to try new activities. Let your kids see that you are trying to adapt as well, that you don't necessarily have it figured out, and that there are new activities or other creative ways that you all can continue to be active. And that will also give them permission. They'll start to be curious. Hey, Mom, Dad, what is it that you're doing? I've never seen you do that before. And that also invites them into a world of curiosity. Or, if they see something and they're like, hey, that looks kind of interesting. Maybe they see an ad on YouTube or on TV or something. Oh, is that something that you would be interested in? Let's look into that. Have you ever thought about doing that? And most of the time teens will say, no, I'm not good at that. Well, let's just try it. What's the harm in it?
So is there anything that you picked up with your kids? And if you guys are listening right now and would put into the chat, is there anything new that happened in your house that someone else could benefit from as a suggestion? Like the idea of an instrument is such a great one, Lori. So Allyson, anything in your house?
As a family, we've started doing things like puzzles just to be able to connect with our teens. So I have a 20 and a 17-year-old, as well as two little ones. And I think I saw I've seen the 20 and the 17-year-old really struggle the most. One's a junior in college and one's a junior in high school. And we've just kind of named how much it hurts them, how difficult it is for them to not be able to engage with their friends and experience college or high school life the way that they expected it. And so, we do puzzles together. We've started playing more board games. My husband actually started playing the guitar because my oldest son plays the guitar. So there's ways in which we're trying out the things that at the same time they are, and we're figuring out what we like and we're figuring out what we don't like.
It's so helpful to hear everybody else sharing the ways they're navigating this, because it is, it's like we're exhausted. We're just so drained from it. It's been about 11 months too long.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, here's my last question for you. So a lot of what drives us, I think, as parents, I know I can speak for myself. I have a new word. It's called anecdata, and it's from Ron Lieber, and it means I'm a study of one. Like basically, I think the rest of the world feels the same way, but it really is my experience. Sure. So I think what drives me a lot about my kids is this fear, right? Like fear that they're depressed and I'm missing it. Fear that their anxiety will get the best of them, whatever it is. And so we are seeing a lot of them right now. And that fear for us as parents can really escalate. How do we turn that into something a little more healthy?
Sure. Always keeping that door open and encouraging your kids to reach out to you. And if they don't feel comfortable reaching out to you, reaching out to a trusted adult. Historically, mental health has not necessarily always had positive associations. There's been a lot of stigma around mental health. I think that being in a pandemic has definitely started to shift that narrative a lot, because you're seeing so many people struggle, and because this social isolation is actually not how we're built. As human beings, we are not built to be socially isolated. We are social creatures. And so using the supports and the resources, reaching out to local professionals if that's available to you. A lot of different health insurance carriers will cover mental health benefits. And so being able to say, something feels off. It doesn't necessarily have to feel wrong or feel bad. But if you're noticing that you're not yourself, if you're noticing the things that used to bring you pleasure are not bringing you pleasure, if you're noticing you're worrying more than you ever did before, you were talking about that fear. When that fear really starts to intensify that way, that's when you really need to take a pause and say, what can I do to get some help? And not because you can't do it on your own, but because you're not supposed to.
I also think the best thing about that advice is that we, in the world of modeling for our kids, Absolutely. We let them see that when it's not working for us, we reach out for help. Stephanie, I love all of your comments. I'm going to put, first of all, thank you that you think my questions are good. And then I'm just going to put up here, Allyson, you're so awesome. Thank you for your knowledge. I've learned so much from reading, school counseling, and these Zooms. Thanks, Stephanie. We love having you on here with us. So Dr. Allyson Holmes-Knight, thank you so much for being here with us. And I don't know if you're going to get to go back to bed or this is the beginning of your day, but thanks for getting up early for us.
Beginning of the day. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.